was a time when the world thought it had everything figured out. Cities were filled with bright lights, fast cars, and people always on the move. There were satellites watching Earth from space, robots doing work in factories, and phones that could show you the whole world in your hand. Scientists were solving big problems, curing diseases, exploring Mars, even talking about how to stop climate change. People worried about many things: wars, viruses, rising sea levels. But no one ever thought they would have to worry about dragons. Dragons, they were just stories, myths, things parents told kids at bedtime, creatures made up by old books and fantasy movies. No one believed they were real, but they were, and they were waking up. It started quietly. In Siberia, deep beneath the frozen ground, something began to move. Seismic sensors picked up strange vibrations, deep, slow, and powerful. At first, scientists thought it was just normal Earth movement. After all, the planet is always shifting a little. But then, the same readings came from other places too: Japan, New Zealand, Yellowstone National Park in America. All at the same time, something was happening under the Earth's crust, something huge. Then came the volcanoes. Mount Fuji, which hadn't erupted in over 300 years, suddenly started to smoke. A volcano near Naples, Italy, that had been asleep for centuries began to rumble again. Across the Pacific Ring of Fire, volcanoes that had been quiet for generations started to wake up. Scientists said it was unusual. Some called it a natural cycle. Others warned people to stay away from danger zones. But no one expected what came next. One night, in a small village in Indonesia, the ground cracked open like an egg. From the hole rose fire, smoke, and something else, something alive. It was massive, covered in black scales that shimmered like broken glass, wings as wide as a football field, eyes that burned with red light. When it opened its mouth, flames shot out like a storm. The village didn't stand a chance. Only a few people survived. They ran through the forests, screaming, crying, telling anyone they met about the monster that came from below. No one believed them, not until it happened again, this time in China. Then Alaska, then Mexico, then Russia. Everywhere the pattern was the same: sudden earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and then something crawling out of the lava. Dragons. Real, living, breathing dragons. They flew over cities, burning buildings and streets. Some landed on highways and crushed cars like toys. Others dove into the ocean and sent giant waves crashing onto coasts. People died by the thousands, maybe more. Governments tried to respond, but they didn't know how. These weren't natural disasters. These weren't wars. This was something else entirely. Some called it the end of the world. Others whispered it was justice, because soon people realized something terrifying. The dragons weren't attacking randomly. They were targeting specific places, cities with nuclear weapons, military bases, oil refineries, research labs. It was as if the dragons knew where humanity's power centers were, and they wanted to destroy them. One dragon even landed in Washington, D.C., right on top of the White House lawn. Cameras caught the moment it tore through the roof with its claws. Another was seen flying over London, circling Big Ben like it was hunting prey. The world went into chaos. Social media exploded with videos and photos. Some people thought it was fake, made with special effects. Others prayed. Others cried. Children asked why the monsters were here. Parents had no answers. World leaders held emergency meetings. For the first time in history, enemies sat together, trying to find a solution. No one had ever fought dragons before. There were no rules for this kind of war. Scientists tried to explain what was happening. They studied old books, myths, legends. They found stories from every culture about creatures like these. Dragons that ruled the skies, dragons that slept underground, dragons that brought fire and ruin. Some ancient texts even warned of a time when the dragons would return. One scientist in Norway discovered a cave filled with carvings older than any known civilization. On the walls were pictures of dragons fighting humans, and in the center of it all was a symbol, a circle split by fire. It looked like a warning. Maybe someone long ago had seen this coming. Back in the present, the attacks kept coming. Every day, more cities burned. Every night, more families lost someone they loved. People began to ask, why now? Why us? There were theories. Some said it was because humans had dug too deep into the earth, disturbing something we shouldn't have touched. Mining, drilling, building tunnels, they said we had gone too far. Others said it was punishment for destroying nature, for polluting the air and water, for not respecting the balance of life. A few whispered that the dragons were never really gone. They had been waiting for the right moment, waiting for humanity to grow strong and careless. And now they had returned. The calm before the storm was over. Now came the fire. The world was on fire. Cities burned under the wings of ancient beasts. Forests turned to ash. Oceans boiled where dragons dove into the deep. The skies were no longer safe. The ground was no longer solid. And for the first time in history, humanity stood not as nations but as one species, facing a threat beyond imagination. People tried to fight back. Soldiers fired missiles at the flying monsters. Jets flew into battle, shooting bullets and launching rockets. But the dragons were too strong. Their scales were like armor. Bullets bounced off them. Rockets barely scratched their skin. In Russia, fighter pilots chased a dragon over Moscow. They fired everything they had. One pilot even got close enough to see the creature's glowing eyes staring back at him before it shot flames that melted his plane. In Japan, tanks lined up near Mount Fuji, aiming at a massive dragon resting on a hillside. They fired round after round. Smoke rose. Fire spread. But when the dust cleared, the dragon still stood. It roared so loud that windows shattered miles away. Military leaders around the world realized the truth. They couldn't win this war the way it had always been fought. Something new was needed. A new kind of war as cities fell and millions died. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers started working together in secret, not just from one country but from many. For years, countries had kept secrets from each other. Weapons, technology, plans, they never shared everything. But now there was no choice. If they wanted to survive, they had to learn how to fight. The dragons, not just with weapons but with knowledge. A special team was formed. It included experts from every field. Geologists who studied the earth, biologists who knew about animals, military officers who understood strategy, and AI specialists who could make machines think faster than humans ever could. Their mission? To understand the enemy. What were these creatures? Where did they come from? And most importantly, how could they be stopped? At first, all they had were stories, videos, and the few pieces of evidence left behind after an attack. But slowly, patterns began to appear. Dragons were smart. The more they watched, the more they realized. These weren't just wild animals. Dragons were intelligent. They didn't attack randomly. They targeted places that gave humans power. Military bases, nuclear silos, oil fields, big cities. They avoided areas without people. They seemed to know what was dangerous and what wasn't. One video showed a dragon flying over a small village in Africa. Instead of attacking, it circled once and flew away. No fire, no destruction, just observation. It was like they were studying us too. Scientists called this behavior selective targeting. The dragons weren't trying to kill everyone. They were trying to weaken human civilization. Some believed they were protecting the planet. Others thought they were taking it back. Either way, they were winning. The world fights back. While scientists worked, the rest of the world tried to survive. In China, people built underground shelters beneath mountains. In Europe, cities set up giant nets and barriers to stop dragons from landing. In the United States, volunteers trained to fly drones modified to carry explosives, but nothing worked for long. Then came the idea that changed everything. What if the dragons had a weakness? Not just in their bodies, but in where they came from. The Siberian discovery deep inside a Cold War-era bunker buried under miles of ice in Siberia A group of researchers found something strange. Old carvings, ancient writings, maps drawn by hands long gone. These were not recent, some were thousands of years old. And they all told the same story. Once, long ago, dragons ruled the earth. Humans were small, weak, and afraid. But then, humans learned to fight back. They built weapons, used fire, trapped the dragons, and sealed them beneath the earth. The carvings showed humans standing victorious over fallen dragons. And in the center of one wall was a symbol, a circle split by fire surrounded by arrows pointing inward. It looked like a plan. Maybe someone long ago had already figured out how to beat them. Maybe the answer was hidden in the past. When the findings reached the global research team, hope returned. What if the dragons were powered by something beneath the earth? What if they fed off heat, energy, or pressure from deep within the planet? If that was true, maybe there was a way to cut off their strength. Maybe the dragons weren't unstoppable. Maybe they could be hurt. Maybe they could be killed. The first plan, the scientists and military leaders met again, this time in Geneva. They agreed on one thing. They needed to strike back, not just with guns or bombs, but with something new. Something powerful enough to reach the dragon's source of strength. They called it Project Prometheus. It would be the most dangerous mission in human history. They would build a weapon capable of reaching the Earth's core, not to destroy the planet, but to disrupt the dragon's connection to it. They believed the dragons drew power from geothermal energy. If they could break that link, the dragons might become weaker, or maybe they would die. The plan was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in practice. They had to drill through hundreds of miles of rock, lava, and pressure hotter than the sun. They had to deliver a powerful charge directly into the heart of the earth, and they had to do it before the dragons destroyed everything. Time was running out. Every day, more cities burned. Every night, more people died. But now, humanity had a plan. And for the first time since the dragons woke up, people felt something besides fear. They felt hope. The world was running out of time. Cities burned. Millions were dead. Survivors lived in fear, hiding in tunnels, forests, and underground bunkers. Every day brought new reports of dragons flying over ruined towns, breathing fire on what was left of human life. But amid the chaos, hope began to grow. A plan had been made. It was called Project Prometheus, a secret mission to strike back at the dragons by attacking their source of power. Scientists believed the dragons drew strength from deep within the earth, from geothermal energy, from ancient heat trapped beneath the crust. If that link could be broken, the dragons would weaken, or maybe even die. Now all they needed was a way to reach the core. Building the weapon in a hidden base under the Swiss Alps, engineers and scientists worked around the clock. They built something no one had ever imagined, a massive drilling machine powered by fusion energy, capable of cutting through rock, lava, and pressure so intense it could crush steel like paper. They called it Terra Breaker. It was not just a drill, it was a weapon designed to punch a hole straight into the heart of the planet. Attached to it was a special warhead, developed using technology from old nuclear weapons. It wasn't meant to destroy the Earth, but to send a shockwave through its layers, disrupting the energy flow that fed the dragons. Once launched, Terra Breaker would dive deep into the planet's mantle and release a pulse that could shut down the dragon's power grid like unplugging a monster from its battery. But there was a problem. How to get it close enough? The dragons were everywhere. Any launch site would be attacked before the weapon could even begin its journey. That's when they realized they couldn't launch it from above. They had to launch it from below, from the only place the dragons hadn't reached yet. The last safe zone beneath the frozen ground of Siberia, in an old Cold War bunker, researchers discovered something amazing. There was a massive cave system stretching for miles under the ice. It was untouched by the dragons, hidden, protected. It was perfect. This became Operation Deep Core. Teams from around the world traveled to Siberia, bringing machines, tools, and soldiers to protect the mission. They set up camp inside the caves, turning them into a secret base. They called it the Nest. Inside, they assembled Terra Breaker. Day and night, workers put it together like a giant puzzle. Scientists tested every part. Soldiers guarded every corner. But they knew the moment they activated the drill, the dragons would sense it. They wouldn't stay hidden for long. A secret betrayal. Just as the final tests were completed, disaster struck. Someone leaked the location. Spy, one of their own, had sent coordinates to an unknown enemy. The next morning, a dragon appeared in the sky above Siberia. It didn't attack right away. It circled once like it was watching. Then it flew away. Everyone knew what that meant. It, too, was calling others. They had to act fast. The mission was moved up. Terra Breaker would be launched within 48 hours instead of weeks. But now came the hardest part. Who would lead the mission? Who would go down with the weapon and make sure it reached its target? Only a few volunteers stepped forward. One of them was a young pilot named Elena Ramirez. Elena Ramirez. The fire within Elena was born in Argentina. Her parents were farmers. She grew up watching planes fly overhead, dreaming of the sky. She joined the Air Force at 18. By 25, she was one of the best fighter pilots in the world. When the dragons came, her entire squadron was destroyed in a single attack. She was the only one who survived. Since then, she had flown missions across the globe, striking back at the monsters that took everything from her. She didn't care about medals or fame. She wanted revenge. And now, she had a chance to give humanity a fighting chance. She volunteered to be part of the team that would guide Terra Breaker into the Earth. Her job was simple: make sure the weapon reached its destination, even if it cost her life. The countdown begins. As the days passed, the tension grew. Every hour brought the dragons closer. Reports came in from scouts. Dragons were gathering near volcanoes. Some had begun circling over Europe. Others were seen flying toward Asia. They knew something was happening. They were coming for Siberia. Inside the base, teams worked non-stop. Final checks were done. Systems were armed. Everyone prepared for the worst. On the morning of the launch, Elena stood in front of a small group of soldiers and scientists. She looked them in the eyes and said, "We've spent our lives looking up to the stars, thinking we're alone in the universe. But we weren't alone. We were just lucky they were sleeping. Now they're awake. And we have to answer. Not with fear. Not with surrender. With fire." Then she climbed aboard the control pod. Terra Breaker roared to life. The ground shook with a final salute. The weapon dove into the earth. The mission had begun. Into the depths inside the pod, Elena watched the screens light up. Depth meters ticked downward. Temperature readings rose, pressure warnings flashed. It was like diving into hell. Outside the window, red-hot lava flowed like rivers. Rocks cracked under the pressure. Steam exploded from vents like volcanoes in reverse. But Terra Breaker kept going. Down. Deeper. Deeper. Then suddenly the alarms went off. Something was wrong. They had been followed. A dragon had found them, not flying in the sky, but swimming through the magma. It had come after them, right into the earth. The beast lunged at the pod, claws slashing through molten rock. Elena fired emergency thrusters, dodging just in time. The dragon slammed into the wall of the tunnel, sending a wave of fire and debris through the shaft. Smoke filled the cabin. Warning lights blinked red. But the mission couldn't stop. They were too close. Elena gritted her teeth. She had one job: get the weapon to the core, no matter what. The mission continues. Back at the base, radio contact was lost. For hours, everyone waited. Silence. Then, just as hope began to fade, a signal came through. Weak. Broken. but clear enough. Target locked, then nothing. No more voices, no more signals. Just silence. Everyone understood. Elena had done her job. Now it was up to the weapon. Would it work? Would the dragons fall? No one knew. But for the first time since the fire began, humanity had struck back, and now the world held its breath, waiting for the answer. The world waited. After Elena Ramirez guided Terra Breaker deep into the earth, all contact was lost. No one knew what happened down there, only that she had reached the core and launched the final strike. Then, without warning, the earth fought back. It started with silence. A strange, heavy quiet fell over the world. In the cities that still stood, people looked up at the sky. Birds stopped flying. Dogs howled. Wind stopped blowing. Then came the shockwave. It began deep beneath the surface, spreading outward like a heartbeat from hell. The ground shook violently. Mountains cracked. Volcanoes roared as if screaming in pain. And then the dragons reacted. Across the globe they shrieked, loud, high-pitched, filled with rage and fear. They rose into the air, thrashing wildly. Their wings beat the clouds. Smoke and fire poured from their mouths, but it was different now. Less controlled, more chaotic. Something was wrong. The dragons were dying as the pulse from Terra Breaker spread through the Earth's core. It disrupted the energy that fed the dragons. It was like cutting off power to a machine. One by one, the great beasts faltered. In Tokyo, a dragon that had ruled the skies for weeks suddenly collapsed mid-flight. It crashed into the sea with a massive splash, sending waves across the city. In New York, another dragon tried to escape inland but stumbled. Its wings folded under its weight. It landed hard on a bridge, crushing cars and buildings before letting out one last cry and then falling silent. In Moscow, a third dragon fought until the end. It climbed higher, trying to reach the clouds. But then, its body gave out. It dropped, like a stone crashing into Red Square with a thunderous boom, all over the world. The same thing happened. The dragons were losing their strength and humanity watched in awe. A final battle over Naples. But not all dragons went quietly. One of the largest remained alive, deep beneath Mount Vesuvius, hidden in a network of tunnels and lava chambers. This was the nest. Scientists believed this dragon was the leader, the oldest, the strongest. If it survived, the threat wasn't over. So a final mission was launched. A team of elite pilots and soldiers volunteered for a suicide mission. They would fly into the heart of Vesuvius and finish what Elena had started. At the head of the mission was Captain Elena Ramirez's best friend, Major Amir Khan, a pilot from Pakistan who had flown alongside her since the first attacks. He carried her helmet with him, and he carried her promise. Humanity didn't rise from the dust to be erased by shadows of the past. We are the fire now. Now, he would light the match. Into the inferno, flying low over Italy, the team approached Vesuvius just as the volcano erupted again. Lava shot into the sky like fireworks from hell. Amir led the charge. Through smoke, fire, and ash, they dove into the crater. Inside, it was worse than any nightmare. Rivers of molten rock flowed below. Walls glowed red hot, and in the center of it all, waiting, was the last dragon, massive, black, eyes burning with ancient fury. It saw them coming, and it was ready. Dogfight in hell, the battle was unlike anything ever seen. Missiles exploded in the air, bullets sparked against scales. Jets weaved between columns of steam and falling rocks. Amir flew straight at the beast, firing everything he had. Flares lit the darkness. Fire danced across the walls. The dragon struck back. Its tail smashed into one jet, sending it spinning into the lava. Another fighter pilot tried to flank it, but the dragon breathed fire so hot it melted his engine mid-air. Soon, only Amir was left. He circled above, breathing hard. His plane was damaged. Fuel was low, but he had one last weapon, a special bomb designed to explode inside magma chambers. If he could drop it in the right place, it might collapse the entire tunnel system and bury the dragon forever. He dove straight toward the beast. It lunged. Claws met metal. Fire met fire. Then, boom! The bomb hit, a flash, a roar, a wave of heat so strong it melted the mountain itself. Lava surged upward. Rocks fell like rain. The whole crater collapsed. Ymir never came out, but the dragon didn't either. Silence at last. When the smoke cleared, Vesuvius was gone. In its place was a deep hole, steaming and smoking. No sign of the dragon. No sign of Ymir. Just silence and peace. For the first time in months, the skies were clear. No dragons, no fire, no screams, only wind and hope. A new world. Begins around the world. People came out of hiding. In Africa, families stepped out of underground shelters. In Asia, survivors hugged each other in the streets. In Europe, children looked up at the sky for the first time without fear. The war was over. Humanity had won. Not with weapons alone, but with courage, unity, and sacrifice. Elena Ramirez was gone. Amir Khan was gone. So were millions of others. But because of them, the world lived on, and the message was clear. Dragons had returned. But so had humanity. And next time, we'll be ready. The world was broken, but not beyond repair. After months of fire, fear, and war, silence finally returned. The dragons were gone. Their roars no longer echoed from mountaintops. Their shadows no longer darkened the skies. But the cost had been high. Billions of people had died. Cities lay in ruins. Forests were turned to ash. Rivers ran red with lava. The air still smelled of smoke. Humanity had won. But at what price? Now came the hardest part: rebuilding. A world reborn. In the first days after the final battle, survivors stepped out of hiding places they had called home for months. Some had lived underground in tunnels and bunkers. Others had hidden in forests or sailed on ships far from land. They were tired, scared, but alive. And now they had work to do. People began to gather, first in small groups, then in larger numbers. They shared food, water, and stories of how they survived. Children who had never seen the sky without fire looked up in wonder. In every corner of the earth, the same question was asked: what happens now? No one had all the answers, but everyone knew this. The world could not go back to how it was before. Too much had changed. Remembering the fallen monuments rose across the planet, not just to honor soldiers and pilots, but to remember everyone who had fought, died, or simply endured. In New York, a statue of Elena Ramirez stood tall in Central Park. Her hand pointed toward the sky. Her eyes looked forward, as if watching for danger that would never come again. In Geneva, a museum opened showing the history of the Dragon War, from the first tremors beneath the earth to the final battle under Vesuvius. In Tokyo, children planted trees where buildings once stood. They called it the Forest of Memory. Everywhere people remembered, because they knew this. If they forgot, the world might fall into the same mistakes again. Learning from the past, scientists went back to the caves in Siberia, the ones where ancient carvings told stories of dragons and humans fighting long ago. They studied them carefully. What they found changed everything. Those old carvings weren't just myths, they were warnings. A long time ago, humans had faced dragons before. They had won once, but they had also forgotten. And when they forgot, the dragons returned. This time, humanity vowed not to repeat the mistake. They built new schools. They wrote new books. They created digital records stored in satellites orbiting Earth, so even if everything else was lost, the truth would remain. They taught their children. Dragons may sleep, but they never die. A new kind of peace For the first time in history, nations stopped fighting each other. There were no more borders filled with hate. No more weapons aimed at neighbors. No more lies and secrets between countries. Instead, leaders from every nation came together. They formed a new global council, not just to protect against dragons, but to protect the planet itself. They agreed to stop digging too deep into the earth, to stop polluting the air and water, to live in balance with nature, because they understood now. The dragons hadn't just been monsters. They had been messengers, reminders that Earth was not ours to control, it was ours to care for. Signs that dragons might still be out there even. Though most believed the dragons were gone, some signs said otherwise. Deep in the ocean, strange heat readings appeared near underwater volcanoes. In remote parts of Africa, local tribes reported seeing shadows flying over mountains at night. In Russia, scientists picked up faint vibrations beneath the ground, too weak to be earthquakes, but too regular to be normal. Some feared the dragons were not truly dead. That they were sleeping again, waiting, watching, but this time, humanity was ready. Not just with weapons, but with knowledge, with unity, with memory. A message to the future years passed. The cities grew again, but differently. Skyscrapers were built, stronger. Energy came from the sun and wind instead of oil and coal. People lived closer to nature, not apart from it. Children learned about the Dragon War in school, not as fantasy but as history. They read letters from those who had fought. They watched videos of the battles. They listened to speeches given by leaders who had stood strong when the world was falling. One speech in particular became famous. It was from Elena Ramirez, spoken the day before she flew her final mission. She said, "Humanity didn't rise from the dust to be erased by shadows of the past. We are the fire now." Her words became a symbol of courage, of hope, of survival. Are the final words, so ends the story of how the world nearly ended and how it was saved. It is not a story of magic or fantasy. It is a story of real people. People who fought when they were afraid, who stood together when everything was falling apart, who rebuilt when all seemed lost, and who remembered. Always. Because the lesson of the dragons was clear. Nature does not forget. History repeats. And next time, we must be ready.